How's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm amazing.
Awesome, thank you for joining me today. For those watching wherever you are, my name is Olivia. I'm with the Hawaiian International Film Festival online creator and critic immersive program, and I'm here with Kealoha, Hawaii's first poet laureate. And you had an amazing world premiere at the Bishop
Yeah.
for the story of everything, and so I wanted to talk to you about that exciting occurrence and more about your creative process as well.
Sounds good. I'm super excited to talk about it.
Yeah.
The story of everything was a long ways coming, so it was a really big relief to have all of our folks on this island see it, and other islands as well, Hilo, Maui, and Kauai.
Yeah, I did learn at the premiere at the Bishop Museum that this was like 10, 12 years in the making.
Yeah, you hit it. It's actually 11.
11? Oh my gosh.
So right in the middle. Yeah, I started writing it like in 2011 when I found out that I was going to be a father. So I kind of went into writing mode and started to like visualize what it would be like to be a dad. And, all kinds of stuff came up, like, insecurities and all, positive stuff as well. But like, there was this one reoccurring question that kept coming up, is that one day this child's gonna ask me where we come from. And for me, it's like my what I subscribe to is science. So I started to write scientifically where we come from. And when we think about like creation stories, from my perspective, like all the creation stories that we know, or the ones that I'm familiar with, what they did was just they captured the knowledge of the time in that space, like whatever culture those creation stories are coming from, they captured like what those people knew scientifically, because science means what we know, and it captured that it in a creative way that like told the story of like how humans came about. So I started to tell, since now it's 2022 and we know so much about genetics and the Big Bang and like all kinds of, all the different processes that are required scientifically to make life. I started to write that story, and it took various forms, and that story kind of was told through my medium, which is poetry, as well as storytelling, and just sort of mishmashed all of those influences, and out came this kind of ridiculous, wild story that tells how humans got here.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing, especially how you're able to jump between your left and your right brain, because a lot of people know you as a poet and an artist, but you have like a scientific like background and a root, and so going from studying more of like engineering, how do you think the process was like marrying both art and science?
It came naturally, because I'm so deeply invested in both science and art, but it definitely felt like like as if I was tickling a certain part of my brain that was like, yes, this is what I love, this is what I've been brought here to do, basically. It's like I've spent so much of my time studying science and so much of my time studying poetry and storytelling. To put those two together, just it really like made me whole as a human, so yeah, it definitely felt great to exercise both those sides of the brain.
Oh, amazing. And then there were a lot of other aspects as well as science. There was music, there was movement and dance. You had actual live performers. I saw an aerialist as well.
Yeah.
That part really blew my mind. I was like, oh my god.
Because you're an aerialist.
Yes. And you don't really see that represented, and so I feel like there are so many different like underrepresented aspects that you like tied together almost like seamlessly, but that happened over the course of 10 years or 11 years. So like, where did you start? Was it just writing? Did it start off as a poem before it became into like a play?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the very initial thing was just one free write, just sitting down, freaking out about being a father, but then also coming up with this rough draft of like a creation story that told my future son how humans got here, starting from the Big Bang, 13.78 whatever billion years worth of time, told in about an hour and a half, an hour 45 minutes worth of like words. And then after that was written, I started to think, well, maybe this could be performed. Maybe this could be shared with people. Maybe folks could get something out of it. So then I started to put on my sort of performative and production side of things, and I was like, well, people learn in different ways. Some people are visual learners. Some people are kinesthetic learners. Some people learn through hearing and hearing the words and stuff. And some people are into music. So it was just natural for me, like, to just bring in all those different elements of visual art and movement and music and and culturally and chanting, so that folks in the audience could get it. Because I know like there's so many different types of learners that if you just bombard them with all the different angles, maybe one of them might stick and help all of the other angles to get in. So that was the idea behind bringing in the very talented cast that we had, and all of them they're professionals in their own right. So it was really just about gathering the ensemble and being like, hey, this is the vision. Can you bring your expertise, and I trust you. I trust whatever you're gonna create. Like, just go, run with it, have fun with it. And then all of the cast, they brought what they brought, and it was brilliant as far as I'm concerned with their contributions. I was just like, oh yes, yes, all of that.
Would you describe it as a collaboration between your cast and you?
Definitely.
Oh.
Definitely. And not only cast and me, but also crew. So and especially with the film, it's like the visual, like the graphics and the editing and the special effects, all that stuff. I couldn't have dreamed about it. What they brought was like a vision that accelerated everything. Like everybody who was brought into the team, like mind blown.
Yeah, truly an ensemble. I have a theater background, so when I think about crews and cast, it's all an ensemble, and they all come together to make something beautiful. And I think that was something that was really inspiring to see the cast and the crew on stage together, and really like relishing like all of your hard work, like 11 years in the making. It's like, yeah, that's amazing. And then as like an audience point of view, I don't really have any background in science, and I feel like if it wasn't for the music and the dance, and even the animation, which was amazing, I think like I would have gotten lost, because all these like nuclear subparticles, I'm like, gosh.
Totally.
Yeah, I would be totally lost, but I feel like you're telling a story, through a movement, through your own voice, and through animation. So tying it all together, it makes it so much more of like an immersive experience rather than like watching like a crash course on
science.
Yes,
yeah, totally. And that's the thing, is like there are different ways, there are different entry points to knowledge, and to do it the arts is sort of my entryway. And why not bring the stuff that is like harder to grasp, like science, like mathematics, and like really just this the idea of STEAM, right? Science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. To enter in that allows people to sort of reach that knowledge point in an emotional and like artistic, creative way.
And I also thought what was really cool was how you personified these different particles in the sun, the earth, the moon. And I know that you talked about like what inspired you for this project was you as a father. And so talk about that process of like basically like associating yourself with these particles that you can't even see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was almost like I don't know how it happened, but when it happened, I was like, oh yes, that idea, the idea to personify quarks, like matter and antimatter, and then personify protons and neutrons, and then personify the sun, the earth, the moon, and all the planets. I mean, like all of that stuff. It really just came from that idea of storytelling, right? Like to create faces on inanimate particles gives them personality, gives us an emotional response to them. So I guess I'm not sure where that idea came from. It just came, right, in that one free write. But the fact that it did come allowed me that entry point to be like, okay, this is how I'm gonna tell the story. Because honestly, I've been trying to combine science and poetry for a number of years before that, but every time I tried, it just came out like cheesy and dorky, and it wasn't moving to me, but this was. So that's why I chased it down the rabbit hole and followed the creative inspiration to where it led, and it ended up turning into a film.
Oh, that's great. I feel like the creative flow being natural instead of having to force these metaphors. I think that's always the best way to do it anyway. So. Yeah, that's really great. And then there is this aspect of moving through time, moving through history, and then there's also movement incorporated into the show. And so if you could also talk about the importance of movement to you personally, and also like the aspect of movement in this play.
Oh, for sure. For me, from a personal point of view, like dancing and movement was actually my first love. So growing up here in Hawaii on Oahu, I grew up watching. I was a little breakdancer, and I was watching all the moves on TV and copying them, and we had our cardboards going. And then as I grew older, I got into hula, so I took a deep dive into that. And then when I went off to college, I was exposed to movement from around the world. So stuff like capoeira and boot dancing, and just all the different cultures that I could just even ballroom dancing, just grab on and just see how that movement affected and related to all the other different styles of movement. So it was really just a crash course of just studying different cultures. And when it came time to do the story of everything, if we're talking about everything that I know and everything that is, then it really was about throwing everything that I knew from a poetry perspective, but also through a movement perspective to try and tell this story. So that's basically what happened is that movement came in as a tool to sort of communicate and create a language, right? So it's when we talk about the introduction of protons, we created movements that allowed us, so that when we brought those protons back into the story and we did those movements, it would allow you to associate, oh, I've seen that before. Oh yeah, protons. And so it's it really helped to sort of create a language throughout the film that helped the story to move along.
Oh, wow. It's so fascinating just thinking about the scope of this project. I know I keep bringing up the 11 years, but that's a big deal. That's also I'm also into musical theater, so I've seen Hamilton, and then that itself was also a decade-long process. And so what kept the momentum for you? What was your drive to finish it and to get it to this point? Over time, sometimes people lose motivation. So what kept you going?
Oh wow, that's a great question. I think what kept it going was, I never really lost heart all throughout the thing, because it was I felt like this was such a special piece to me that it didn't matter whether or not it got performed or showed. I just wanted to develop it because it was an important story for me to tell, And the first performance of it was in 2015, so 4 years after the initial free write. So there's been sort of signposts along the way, different benchmarks along the way that have helped us sort of create levels to the process. So that particular production was funded by the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation. So they gave me a grant to finish the project and put it up on stage. And then after that, we started to tour it to various cities throughout the United States, and places like Arkansas and Utah and Arizona and California. And then eventually the Engage in the Census Foundation saw it in California, and they were like, hey, do you want to turn that into a film? And this was back in 2017. And then I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we filmed in 2018 and 19. brought it back to Hawaii Theater in 2019 and performed it in front of a live audience. And then from there it was the editing process. So then that was a little bit more out of my hands, but I was still part of the process and providing feedback and like sort of like directional ideas. But really it was up to the directors and the producers to take it to the next level. So all along the way, it was about just being patient, but also just really enjoying the process. You know.
What advice would you have for other local writers, artists, performers, poets, filmmakers who are starting basically from scratch? Like they're basically at their free write portion and they're looking at, where is this gonna go? What advice do you have for them in taking, their stories to this next level?
I guess the biggest piece of advice I have is to write choke and to put it out there. Like whatever your medium is, whether it's live performance or whether it's creating video or audio, just put it out there and see what kind of feedback you get. Don't be afraid of putting stuff out there and having it not be a totally finished product, because it's not really a finished product until you decide that you don't want to touch it anymore. You can put it out there, get some feedback, change it, put it out there again in a different format, and like it's an iterative process. We create this looping mechanism of like putting stuff out there and getting feedback, putting stuff out there and getting feedback. So if once you understand that it's just a process and that it's not the end of the world to put something out there and like you can't touch it again, then it's cool. Like that's my biggest advice is, don't be afraid. No, like just get it out there.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. My last question for you, because you're telling a story of past with the Big Bang and the evolution from then, but then you're going into the future. And so, what was the process of telling a story that wasn't exactly beginning, middle, and end? Because there's no end at the moment. Like we're all still here.
Yeah.
And so at what point did you decide to look into the future of like what could be?
I think it was still during the writing process when I did need to figure out like, well, how do I end this performance piece? Because humans finally get created, and then we go travel around the world, migrate around the world from Africa throughout all the different parts of the planet. And I was like, okay, that could be an ending, but what would be a more interesting ending is if I did project into the future, and since the whole production was all about like a scientific perspective on where humans come from, I wanted to approach the future from a scientific perspective. And so I decided, like the biggest scientific issue that we have right now that we need to tackle is climate change. So it was a natural progression to be like, I'm gonna talk about the future in regards to climate change, because if we're following the science, like this is the thing that we have to address right now. So it was natural, and it was part of the writing process. And then once I was able to sort of create that final future piece, and I was like, okay, that might be a good way to end it. And for me, I'm very hopeful of the future. So the piece ends with that idea of hope, of what we can do if we really just get it together.
Yeah, and I love that, because I think it's very easy to fall into existentialism and think that there's nothing, that this is all gonna blow up and implode in a matter of years. But you did put a spin on it, and you also gave us options, which different routes we can take. And I think like that puts things into perspective as well, because we all have a role in our future. And so I really appreciate you for telling this story and encouraging the greater outside world to care about the future, especially younger generations. I think we've grown up post 9/11 and like all these different possible apocalypses, and so you know, I really do think it's important to have like a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light being us, and you know what we can do to affect positive change on this planet that we find ourselves on.
Oh, for sure. Super stoked to put those messages out. Thank you for receiving that message. I'm looking forward to what you put out there as well.
Yeah, me too. I'm gonna be definitely working and projecting the future to be, you know, much brighter than what it is now. So right now, I'm definitely in the thick of it. I'm very much thick in the forest. So like, what is the story? How am I going to tell it? And you know, how can I, you know, structure this, you know, so that it's you know, leading somewhere. And I think, you know, for me, it's also a process of like, well, the story is not over yet. I'm technically still in act 2 of my story. So if anything, I felt very inspired to, you know, let it breathe and give it time to grow and to work on it, instead of like trying to shorten it into this like imaginary deadline. Yeah, there's like this, I think there's also this like society of content creation. We want to get things out as much as possible. We need content every week, and
gotta get those followers.
yeah. But there's so much more of like a deeper purpose for your story and mine too. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Where can people in the future, near future, see the story of everything? I know it just premiered, but where's next?
So next is gonna be West Coast, so California. I think we're going north and south, and then East Coast. So that's in April, and then East Coast in May. But the deal is that, you know, those are all live showings, and eventually the idea is to figure out some kind of distribution, whether it's, you know, just putting it out there or whatever. But if you want to follow the progression where we're gonna be, the website is www.storyoferything.org. So if you are inspired by the film, it's like, how do I connect with my community? How do I connect with myself in mindfulness? How do I get involved with science? So like all of those different like links and toolkits are on the site to really just sort of broaden the experience that the Story of Everything is trying to do.
Amazing. Well, thank you for being here today, and now you know what to do. Visit www.storyoferything.com or .org.